Good morning, dear students. I'm your English teacher, Yobash Kasyavara. So, today's our new theme is Lesson 32, Talking About Books. In this lesson, we will speak about Jane Austen's book, Pride and Prejudice. Last month, I gave you the e-version of this book, and all of you read this book. Now, let's speak about the characters of this book. Pride and Prejudice is the best seller books of Jane Austen. All over the world it's read by all the people and make a film. Character overview. Let's look through the characters in this book. Elizabeth Bennet. Elizabeth is the second oldest Bennet daughter. She is intelligent, outspoken, and witty, and the protagonist of Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth is quite a controversial character in her time, for women did not typically behave as Elizabeth does. She speaks her mind in a time when women were supposed to be quiet, or at least not so straightforward and blunt. Elizabeth's character development plays a huge role in the novel's plot. Fitzwilliam Darcy. Darcy is a member of gentry, upper class, and therefore is very powerful and influential, being part of the gentry. Darcy obviously is very wealthy, has a very well-established family. At first, Darcy is not as well liked, for he is not as thoroughly described as Elizabeth, and because Elizabeth is a heroine, we as readers typically follow her opinion, which she, of course, is not very fond of Darcy at the beginning. As the novel progresses, however, it is easy to see that Darcy is Elizabeth's counterpart and is truly a good character. Are the Bennet sisters. Jane, Elizabeth's older sister, and the eldest of the Bennet daughters. Jane is just what a young woman of Jane Austen's time period was expected to be. She is both reserved and gentle and serves as the novel's and society's ideal woman. Mary is a middle daughter. Mary serves as a moral figure in the novel, for she is extremely well-read, certainly the most of the Bennet daughters, and formal. Kitty. Catherine Kitty is the fourth Bennet daughter, and like Lydia is extremely immature and silly. Her head is constantly filled with thoughts of the militia. Lydia is the youngest and most ridiculous of the Bennet daughters. Her running away with Wickham plays a crucial part and displays her very unladylike immaturity. Mrs. Bennet and her obsession with marriage. Many readers laugh at Mrs. Bennet's ridiculousness, and indeed Austen does use her to implement comedy into the story. However, there is a very real trust behind Mrs. Bennet's character. Women of that time only could obtain freedom through marriage, and women were expected to marry as soon as they could. If a woman didn't, she was looked down upon by society, and she was considered to be an old maid. Take Charlotte Lucas, for example. Charlotte is 6 years older than Elizabeth and marries Mr. Collins not because she loves him, but so she will no longer be a burden on her family, who must support her as long as she is single. Important themes. Pride and Prejudice. Darcy is extremely proud and is determined not to like others, for he is too good for them. Whereas Elizabeth is extremely prejudiced and is determined not to like Darcy, for she believes he is pompous and thus refuses to find the good in him. Instead, she merely looks for flaws. Class. Darcy is a member of upper class, whereas Elizabeth is a member of the upper middle class. Notice the obvious difference in home. Darcy's home is very spacious and well decorated with paintings, statues, and other expensive high-class elements, whereas Bennet's home is not quite so elegant. Even so, the Bennet's house was much better in both size and decorations than the lower class. Love. In these pictures you can see the relationships of love. Lydia and Wickham, Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet, Mr. Collins and Lucy, Elizabeth and Darcy and Elizabeth. Lydia and Wickham. Austen uses Lydia and Wickham relationship to represent a bad marriage. Lydia ran away and lived with Wickham out of the wedlock. During Austen's time, this was completely unladylike and unacceptable. Lydia's marriage will no doubt end up like Mr. and Mrs. Bennet's, which, of course, is not good or happy marriage. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are the inconstant bickering and fighting throughout the entire novel. Austen intends for readers to infer that Bennet's marriage was similar to Lydia's and Wickham's quick due to reigning homes. Charlotte and Collins. In this here you can see the relationships of Darcy and Elizabeth and Bingley and Jane. Reputation. Reputation seems to be a difficult theme for the students to understand in Pride and Prejudice, for reputation is not as important in modern society as it was a Regency period. In that society, a woman's reputation was the single most important thing, for if a woman did not follow the strict social rules such as acting in ladylike manners like being quiet and reserved, she was at risk of not being well liked. If a woman was thus picked on, her chances of getting married were next to impossible, and if a woman did not get married, she became a burden financially to her family, who had to support her. This is obviously shown through Lydia's foolish and disgraceful elopement with Wickham. Finish. The humbling of Darcy. The humbling of Elizabeth. Now it's your turn. Grab a scrap sheet of paper to write down your answers. Bring your ideas into class tomorrow for the discussion. The home task. There is given questions. There are again 5 questions. Do you believe Pride and Prejudice to be a conservative text or revolutionary, or both? Explain your answers and provide page numbers for textual evidence and support. Jane Austen's novel was originally titled First Impressions. What roles do Jane's first impressions play in the novel? Do you think this was an appropriate title? Charlotte does not marry Collins for love, but rather for economic security. Is this view of marriage today still acceptable? Compare and contrast Mr. and Mrs. Bennet's marriage to Lydia and Wickham's. Do you think Lydia and Wickham will end up like Mr. and Mrs. Bennet? Both Elizabeth and Darcy make an extraordinary change throughout the duration of the novel. Do Darcy could have made the change with Elizabeth, or vice versa? Why or why not? So it is the end of our lesson. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye. See you later for the next video lessons.